we're going to play with the ideas, procession, and return. We're going to approach it, of course, from a Platonic tradition. And therefore, there's one idea we need to make sure we see right from the beginning. And so you see it right here on the next page. All I have to do is write it down. That's the idea of potential. Consider. Everything we say follows from this one word. Let's consider it this way. The last time we met, we developed this curious idea that if we can understand relationships and we added a very interesting word to it all, if we understand human relationships, then we should gain an insight into certain common features which are found in all relationships. Any relationship. Now, last time we explored a young man by the name of, what was his name? Manny. And he indeed was pursuing a young lady by the name of Sarah. And by detailing what's involved in that kind of a relationship, we went the next step and said, those things you can say about this relationship will give you an insight into any relationship. And therefore, we explored it and we discovered quite a few things. And then we made the quick change and we said, everything that we said about Manny, you can also say, therefore, about mind. Everything you say about Sarah, you can equally say about soul. Because man's particular problem involves relationships. That is to say, remember first, though, we said soul we're going to call exactly the way in which the Greeks saw it, which it has three paramount features. It commands you to do things because it has some plan for you to do things, and you make a plan because you care. And therefore, those things come together and presuppose the existence of something that can do those things in a unity, and that very same thing is said to bring with it life or vitality. So therefore, that's what we mean by soul. Now, then we said, did we not? We said, by heavens, you know what? This relationship can be described this way. Here is Manny, and he wants to get into a relationship with Sarah. And therefore, we could equally talk about the relationship between mind and soul, for certainly we are aware of the fact that we have mind. We have mind. And therefore, the best thing to do in understanding the human condition is be able to understand this possession of mind, or this participation by soul and mind. Of course, the other side of the relationship equally is present, is it not? That soul obviously then must command its body, and therefore man is in this situation, interestingly enough, that he has two immediate things to which he relates: body and mind. But in principle, whatever properties you discover in general between any two is equally applicable all the way up. And we equally said, did we not, that in this Platonic vision, above mind, which is another word, we could call it being, intelligence. These are hyphenated terms, as we said before, and being. There stands the idea of oneness. Beyond that is the one, or the ultimate good. So therefore, you see, man is in a relationship with mind, he's in a relationship with his body, and part of us wants to understand this entire chain and the best we can understand and experience that to that degree, we're able to make a oneness with our mind, intuition, experience of the totality of what exists, for this is the totality of what exists. Well, that's what we played with last week, right? And certain things we said which were rather interesting, did we not? We said, first of all, just to quickly review, that for this relationship to exist, it presupposes a transference of power. All relationships presuppose a transfer, a transfer in some way, or a transition. Transfer or transition of power. That is to say, Manny, seeing Sarah, it awakens in him an idea. And let's assume now that he has this idea and he sees something about Sarah, he now then acts. So therefore, he must have a power. That idea must be the cause. He must have a power, internal power, that keeps himself together, keeps him active. But then there's an additional power, an external power. And that external power, remember what we said, that's what allows him then to engage in an activity. He makes the first move, as it were, to Sarah. So therefore there's a cause, the idea he has in his mind. He has a certain power that keeps himself together. He has an additional amount of power that allows him to proceed towards Sarah, and that allows him therefore to have an activity, to extend an activity. And so with that, he makes the first step. Of course, as we all know, that activity itself has a certain power. And that power of that activity, therefore, can produce an effect on Sarah. So there's the power of the activity, and that power of the activity, as you can see, right, then awakens something in Sarah. Now, she has to, of course, in some way intuit his intentions and see whether or not that thing that seems to be moving him is the kind of thing that she can approve of. So therefore, it awakens within her a concern to see whether or not she can understand and whether she agrees with or finds a kinship with that idea, for she has been affected. Now, wouldn't you agree, to the degree she's been affected, that means there must have been something in her that had a potential. That is to say, she indeed must have been open to such a move, or it could never have had an effect upon her. She could be indifferent to his move. Therefore, it presupposes that there must be a potential power that was awakened in her. Equally well, would you not agree that everything he's doing, all the activity and the power of the activity that he engages in, is in view of this idea? Now, this idea is a rather curious thing. We could call it an idea. We called it an idea, dream. Even call it an ideal. Or we can call it, more formally, a plan, a schema, a pattern. Any one of these words will do. Now, she being affected by Manny now, she herself similarly can now react to that, cause now she now relates, that's his movement. Now in a similar way, she then has a certain power. Internal power keeps herself together. External power, she may now decide to in some way respond. And therefore everything we just said about Manny can equally be said about Sarah. That she has an internal power, keeps herself together. External power, she's willing to engage him. The activity that she engages in is going to be to her degree consistent with the image she has, which she hopes is like the idea that Manny has. And there's a certain power to her activity, and then she's willing to consider what may result, and therefore there's a certain potential power that is exhibited. Now, that's just kind of reviewing a bit what we did last time, and now I want to go back to this one word, potential. If under similar circumstances we can expect similar things, right? If under similar circumstances if that in general is an interesting principle, if under similar circumstances we can expect similar things, if we treat the soil in a similar way and we treat the soil and the farm in a similar way each year, and the result is productive amount of food stuff that comes from that particular area or farm, then we work under the idea that under similar circumstances we can expect similar things, and so we're guided by patterns. By the way, let's see if we can push this for a moment. Then would you say in general, if there was a planet somewhere, a star system similar to our own, under which similar circumstances to ours were generated, isn't it not likely that we might then have a basis for expecting similar things to emerge? And therefore, in some distant planet somewhere, at some time in the past or present or future, there might be a place called Brooklyn, where people function in a similar way. And everyone knows Brooklyn is the only place that generates saints by a great number, right? Okay, what does that suggest? That suggests, does it not, that certain forms are in place that await a certain set of conditions, and when those conditions then are fortuitous for the development of that particular thing, so then it emerges. Now, all we're saying at this point in is that those forms that are in place await the propitious occasion, which is similar circumstances that allow us to expect similar things to emerge. Therefore, these forms then are the source of the existence of all things. For if under similar circumstances similar effects can be expected, therefore these forms must be in place, and they are the source of the existence of all things. Now, in our relationship with Mani and Sara, you see, this idea, dream plan, is on the human level no different from that, for we can call this a form pattern, and therefore, through his power, his first power, and now notice what we must say about this though. He must have the potential power to exhibit that act consistent with that form, and in a similar way, there must be on Sara's part a receptivity. Right? A receptivity, an openness for that advance. She has to be open to it. She has to be open to such a thing, and therefore she has to have a certain potential openness to receive that and respond to it, or there would be no relationship. And would you not agree, she is assuming that the particular idea he has in mind might be very akin to hers. And then we went one step further and we said, suppose the best plan or form that they happen to have is that each wants each to be themselves as much as it is possible for them to be so. And therefore, the kind of plan he may have in his mind is the freedom to allow each of them to emerge to be themselves as much as it's possible. And therefore, it's not a model, a strict model that he's going to impose on her, though some people do in fact have such plans when they want to make the other person exactly like themselves.
To conform to what their predetermined ideas are.
Yeah. But see, this is a step above it. This is more human. Right? So we wanted to do that, and that's what we did last week with this idea. Now, when each wants each to be themselves as much as it's possible for it to be so, and therefore he's giving her the condition, he's giving her the condition, presenting the conditions to be as much as she can be with him. Now, that means that as far as this is concerned then, as she meets, the conditions are to be as much as it is worth, that means then this is the way in which she then can be said to exist on a higher level. So therefore, her existence, therefore, being as much as she most wants to be, she might seek and be realized with him, and therefore, he presents the conditions for her existence, and of course she presents him with the very same conditions for him to be, because therefore what they are striving for then is one basic and principle of idea of philosophy called the guiding principle of all philosophy, Platonic philosophy, is the idea of likeness. So each wants to become as much as it is possible like that very ideal, which is obviously to be themselves as much as they would like to be. So therefore that principle, that what is sometimes called the supreme principle of creation, which is likeness, is governing relationships as well as creation. Now, just remember we're still on the word for potential. Now let me add one more now before I go back to the word potential. If we are, just to use an old idea, just to bring back an old idea we worked on previously, would you agree if we're building a barn? I want to use 4 words now. Right. The cause of that barn coming into existence, on the first level, must be the materials. Therefore, there's a material cause for that to be there. Put the materials on the building site and they're not going to come together. You need an efficient cause, someone who can work with those materials. And that's called an efficient cause. But even though you have the workman and material, that's not going to do you any good unless you have a plan. And even though you have a plan and materials, it's not going to come into existence unless it comes into existence to meet some need. Sometimes that's expressed by a phrase, that for the sake of which it came into existence. That for the sake of which it came into existence. Let's take a look at this. Even though there's a plan and workmen and materials, unless it's going to meet someone's need, it's not going to come into existence. Right? And that's sometimes called the final cause. This is the final cause. And the plan is called the formal cause. Well, then look what we're saying now. The formal cause is this idea of this relationship. Yet that's their goal. Therefore, in relationships, the formal cause is the same as the final cause. The formal cause is the same as the final cause. That is to say, what's driving him is this idea. Her response to it is equally in response to that idea. They both are going to do everything they can to achieve that together, so each can be as much as they can to be ideally as they want to be within that relationship so that they can emerge fully. Then that idea, the formal cause, is the cause of its existence. That idea, therefore, is the formal cause. And since they both are trying to do everything they can to become like it, that's their goal, therefore that's the final cause. And they're going to use their existence together as the material cause, working together, efficient cause. Therefore we can see these 4 causes all together in this one thing united. Now, but it's only a possibility. This relationship is only a possibility. It's only a possibility. But if they can produce the ideal circumstances, if they can somehow manage the ideal circumstances, then we might expect similar things to result from ideal relationships. Therefore, a possibility emerges to fully actualize that form. right, to develop it, to manifest it. To the degree they can, to the degree to which they can do that, as we said last time, the degree they can do this, to that degree we can say, we can measure their relationship to the degree that it comes close to that ideal. We can measure it in terms of its degree of perfection. That's an internal judgment. We can say you're getting close to it, not getting close to the degree to which you can get close to it. Now remember what we were doing last time? We're going to do the same thing now. Take Manny out there and just put mind in there. Instead of Sarah, put soul. And everything we said is the same thing for both. That is to say, man possesses a mind. He's in a relationship with a mind. And that gives him the power to know, to relate. The soul then, man, must then enter into a relationship with the mind in such a way that he can then see that mind, therefore, is an intelligent thing. It has an intelligence. It offers man a way to be as a knowing being, an intelligent, sensitive, knowing being. And now it's up to the soul to respond to that. If the soul likes that, and responds to it positively, then can we not say the task for man then, putting it now this way, mind and soul, that a new possibility emerges to fully manifest or actualize what lies within that possible relationship coming from mind itself. And that is for the soul to be most and best what it is most possible for it to be by actualizing that form or the idea within mind itself. That means then that mind itself passes to the soul a power to know. It then allows an activity to emerge. Right? Power to know. Right? There's a power to that activity of knowing. As a consequence of that potential power of knowing, we can then now try to know ourselves through this knowing. So therefore it can revert upon itself, so we want to see what we are, we want to see what we participate in. Now, as we said a short while ago, now we're back with potential, there is a form implicit in man through that relationship, which man then must realize, must discover, must realize, must manifest it. And it must already exist as an idea, as a potential. Right. Just as if we put a seed in the ground, right, and then it begins to stir and grow a bit, and then finally gathers some, right, and finally blooms, and then flops over, and then finally there's only a seed left. We can talk about this seed as having a potential. Here, right, it's actualized, right, about 20% of it. Here it's actualized about 50% of it. Here 70%, here 90%, until finally is a seed. Correspondingly then, 80% is yet to go, 50% is yet to go, 30% is yet to go, 10% is yet to go, as the potential. Therefore, the idea of potential is that man has a possibility, a potential, to emerge in a fully actualized way as he comes to grips with the basic idea within the mind itself, which is nothing other than his own destiny. Now, let me just push a couple more steps. I'll take this out now. I want to go back with Manny and Sarah, or mind and soul, same thing. Once he acts, right? Once he acts, there's a potential for him to act. That's from the idea, right? He puts into practice. That potential is awakening what was potential. That activity comes right out of that idea. Therefore, the potential is also in the activity itself. It's guiding the activity. It's directing the activity. Therefore, in the activity itself, it's close to its cause. Its activity is close to its cause. When it has the effect, when it produces the effect, see, potentially it's here. The activity is here. The effect is third. That means, if we look at this, obviously anytime you're engaged in any activity whatsoever, there's always a difference between what you do and the idea you have that you want to do. The idea itself is ideal. That's what we called it. It's an ideal. We try to shape it, we try to nurse it into existence, but essentially that idea is ideal. It's the cause, of course, of the existence of this relationship. It's a transference of power, but essentially it's an ideal. Therefore, the activity itself is one step away from the ideal. Therefore, it's most similar to it. The effect on Sarah, right? The effect is a further step. And therefore it's 2 steps away from the ideal. So what? Well, it's not, that's very helpful, you see. That means the closer you understand the activity of Mani, mind, the closer you are to understanding the ideal. She's going to judge, Sarah's going to judge that activity because she doesn't see into his mind, of course, but she can judge the activity, and she's going to infer from that activity whether or not she can intuit that idea. So if we can understand the activity of the mind, the way the mind functions, we are getting closer to understanding mind itself. It's not the same as mind itself, but that will bring us at least a step closer, right, to what is in fact more perfect as it is in itself.
This might be out of place, but Paul brings up the point that a man is supposed to be man to the woman, but the female to God.
Do you mind saying that again, please?
A man is supposed to be, in other words, a man is supposed to be in charge of the woman, lead the woman,
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's supposed to be as a woman is to God. Woman is to man, he should be
He's
to
supposed
God.
to be the woman and man, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like this better.
Okay.
Only because I don't see that second step. This is the step, you see? This is the mean between the two. This is the mean between the two. Whenever you have to do something and there isn't a mean between two, that makes it difficult to understand. But if you have a mean between two, even two extremes, it makes the transition understandable. It makes your role more intelligible. Therefore, as a cooperative effort, it's more fun. So I like this second step. Pardon me, let me get it. Now, according to this kind of reasoning, and I got a couple of quotes I brought with me to share with you in a minute. This means, therefore, that here he had only an ideal. Now he's risking realizing it. He's moving away from the ideal. He's departing from it to try to find its realization in something else. So necessarily he is departing from the ideal. He's departing from the ideal, and yet his intentions, being what they are, as well as hers, is to realize the ideal. Therefore, they have a desire for its realization. And they seek jointly then to manifest it. So he departs from it to engage in the activity, right? And he's doing that for a purpose. He wants to see it. He wants to see it, he wants to touch it, he wants to contemplate it at present, in the present. Not as an idea, but in its manifestation in the present. Therefore, he departs from the ideal to realize the ideal. Therefore, he desires its realization and its manifestation. So there's a departure and a return, necessarily. There must be, therefore, in this the same thing. Now look here. Mind and soul. See, mind and soul, same thing, same thing. We talk about it in the same way. Mind had to give itself to soul. Soul had to be receptive to receive it. There is an idea to be realized in that relationship. Therefore, in giving itself to soul, it departed from itself. Once departed from it, however, there's a desire to return to its source and discover its origin. Therefore, there are two movements, a natural departure, return, which of course is true, is it not, among nearly all species. Once a child or a living thing is born or given birth to, there is quickly, not only does it come into existence, because of its cause, the mother, father. But coming into existence, it brings with it the necessity, right, as a necessity, the well-being proper for the maintenance and the continuity of that existence. Or, along with its existence, coming into existence, comes the well-being appropriate for that being. Therefore, curiously enough now, we're taking this principle and we're now putting it right back into the mind and soul. And therefore, when the mind departs from itself and enters into the soul must be willing to accept it. In accepting it, it recognizes the mind must have departed from its own ideal. The soul wants to realize that ideal. It desires its realization and its manifestation. It knows that it has a new existence now because of mind, since now it has the capacity to know and to realize itself. And therefore it knows its new kind of existence is a result of that participation, and with it must come its own well-being. Therefore, 1, 2, 3, right? Therefore, by returning and trying to discover its origin, it's studying the activity of mind. That's what it's doing, the activity of mind. Obviously then, as it explores the activity of its mind itself becomes more perfect because it's using its mind to understand its mind, and therefore the end of understanding that kind of existence and participation is that it receives the well-being proper for its nature. That well-being proper for its nature is what causes our friends Manny to smile. That's why in such a realization there is said to bring with it a smile or bliss or self-realization. Now, I have an interesting quote. This is turning everything upside down, because we are the possessor. We are the possessor. We are the possessors of mind. Yet we are being guided by it. We're dependent upon it, for without it our existence would be deprived of all the things that we are willing to call human. Therefore, even though we are the possessor of mind, mind itself is higher. Look here, we are the possessor of mind. We have possessed it. We have possessed it. But it is the cause of our rational existence. The source of our well-being. And obviously, it's also the very condition for us recognizing our own perfection. Because the same idea we had before, since it's an ideal, remember we said we can measure any relationship to the degree to which the individuals in that relationship are fulfilling the very condition of likeness. Remember what we said about that? So in the same way, each of us, to the degree that we can say we are possessors of mind, or we possess mind, have a goal. The goal is that each of us wants to be as much as we can be, and to be as much as we can be must be then to come face to face with the existence of what is the highest view of mind itself, and how can we see its function in such a way that we can then gain an insight into its activity so that we can get closer to its perfection, and finally, if possible, gain an insight into mind itself, for that's the higher goal. But this is first, this is second. Now, what do you gain from that? Well, you know what you gain? Remember what we said before, that man is in an interesting condition. Right? He participates and has a body. Right? We have a soul, the way we defined it. Soul itself participates in mind. Mind participates in the same way in oneness. Oneness itself participates in, or is generated from, or derived from, the one itself, which is the ultimate term. So what do you gain, therefore, by doing 1 and 2? Why, that gives you something interesting. By studying relationships and seeing the way it functions with mind and soul, you can then say, you then can gain an insight into this relationship as well as this relationship, and from that you might be able to then go further and go 1, 2, 3, 4. For these are all relationships, and all relationships have the same elements in common, and therefore by intuiting what is an ideal relationship between Manny and Sarah, heck, it gives us an insight in how best to treat our own mind and how we should then relate to our own body, and that allows us then to say, by heavens, I am some way beginning to understand my existence on those 2 levels. Then you have 1, right, 2, 3, 4, ultimate.
From the body, you go directly to the one.
Same relations. Relations are common. The principles of any relationship are common. Therefore, we can really use human relationships as a kind of a lab, a natural way of being, which is open to us naturally, to gain insights in the entire thing. Therefore, human relationships are not separate from, but are part and parcel of the very dynamics of the nature of reality on any number of levels.
People base their body, then they're counterproductive.
Yeah. Well, then they're losing an understanding of a key relationship. Yeah. You can be at war with any one of these. Remember, I promised a quote. Oh, thank you. I didn't see it. Now we're going to make a jump because I want to come back with a rather curious notion, which is where we're going to. All that is immediately produced by any principle, and any one of these can be a principle for the one below it, all that is immediately produced by any principle remains in the producing cause and proceeds from it. That is to say, it both remains and proceeds. So, what are we going to do? We're going to go back to the one word we worked on, potential. Would you agree then, we can say, this is one of the things, we don't care which one it is. Right? In each case, there must be an internal power that keeps whatever it is together. There must be an external, certain kind of power which can go external to it. That external power then allows this thing to engage in some activity. And each activity may vary depending upon its power, right? So it also has a power or degree of power. But did we not say that whatever it's going to do, right, there must have been something that guides all of this, that lies potentially there to be realized? Because with the departure, remember what we said about mind? It departs from itself, right? Is willing to give itself to soul. Soul, on the other hand, is willing to receive it. And being able to receive it is willing then to function with it. Those three go together. Therefore, there's a departure and a return. Right? So this is the departure. This activity is the departure, or sometimes called procession. And once then it comes into existence, what does it do? Right? It has an effect. And good heavens, what does it do? It seeks its own source. It's astonished, as it were, by its own existence and seeks to realize its source. Now, in that seeking to realize its source, would you not agree, is nothing other than that idea that lied potentially within the cause itself. Do it again. What it's going to realize is nothing other than that idea in the cause which was the source of its own existence. Therefore, necessarily, it recognizes its own source in this encounter. It recognizes its own source. It recognizes its source, recognizes the source of its existence, recognizes, therefore, it has increased power as it returns in this way, and also the source of its perfection. You know what that means? That means as it proceeded and returned, it discovers that, in reality, part of itself never left. For if it finds its own existence, it finds the source of its existence and the source of its perfection in the cause, in its own cause, and the cause that brought it into existence, then, hey, it must be a part of it which remains in its cause and yet proceeds from it to return to the source of its perfection and existence. In a wondrous experience of self-knowledge. But it isn't the self that identified with body or soul, but it's the kind of self-knowledge which is realized through mind, and therefore it recognizes the higher part of its own being is true mind itself. Mind, in this case, being that great hypothetical thing called being, intelligence, and vitality, which is experienced, of course, in Hinduism as they sometimes call it, Chat Chitananda. Which is, of course, being, bliss, and consciousness. Right? That's the name of it. For the unity of mind, the unity of mind is called by many thinkers consciousness. And in Greek, of course, that's that great concept of sunoia.
Something new.
Yeah, from nous, yes. Yeah, sunoia. Yeah, from nous. Pulling together the mind in all of its pure perfection so that it can see in a unitary vision. That's called, by some translators, conscious. Pardon me, do it again.
Just to know you like a pulsation and it's kind of.
Oh, does it have a pulsating quality? No, its quality is clarity. Clear.
Clarity.
Yeah, clarity. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very interesting question because the level of pulsing, which in Shivism or Shaivism, Muktananda's school, between these two is the spanda, S-P-A-N-D-A, and that's the pulsing of the universe, coming in and out, pulsing of the universe. As I understand it, in the is it Spandikika, Karikikas, I think. Yeah.
What's pulsing the universe itself with vitality? Potentiality.
Actually, should we do it? Yeah, we do it. Yeah, okay. How much time is there in the moment? Sir, how much time is there in the moment?
In us?
In the moment, yeah.
In the moment?
In the instant, yeah. How much? Is it 10 seconds, or is that too much?
I'm not sure.
1 minute? In the moment. Here, I'll time it.
No, there's no time.
What? You're not helping. How much time is there in the moment?
A moment.
It's timeless. You can't time it.
Now look here. This is called the instant. Instantaneous. The instant. The instant. See? It only lasts. And then another one. And another one. Thank goodness. Where does it come from and how does it burst forth? So, this is the instant is the effect. And so anything that changes, whatever changes, would you not agree the changes are predictable? Changes are predictable. That means that what changes, what's new, and what drops away, what's new, what emerges new, at each second, at each instant, and what drops away at each instant must be because there must be some form, model, ideal, and therefore picture it this way. Here's the instant, right? In that flash, there must have been a return to its source. The next stage in its development immediately then must be grasped, and on that basis of an ideal being realized then, the old drops away, the new is added for the next instant. That takes place as a spanda, as a pulse. The whole universe is pulsing. Comes into existence, passes out of existence, comes into existence, passes out of existence, in a pulsing universe. That's what we have. This is called, if you like it, by the way, the third hypothesis in Plato's Parmenides, which is a remarkable work. So that's the way in which form, right, behind it, right, whatever determines that, right, in the moment, this is the realm of our experience, proceeds in a predictable and ordered way. Therefore, there presupposes there must be forms, models, and ideals behind the nature of reality upon which there is continual reflection, studied sculpting, as it were. Each moment then is sculpted, dropping away this and that, returning, dropping away each moment.
Suarez says it's life, death, life, death.
Okay, life, death, new,
so
life.
continuous.
Yes, quite true. Life, death, yeah. The dynamics of this, if you want to look at it, is check Plato's Parmenides, the third hypothesis. So, what I wanted to read, therefore, I can now kick into. All that is immediately produced by any principle both remains in the producing cause and proceeds from it. Therefore, curiously enough, if you keep this logic to it, in one curious sense, we haven't left our cause. We are seeking to return to it. Or you can put it in another way and say that in the mind of God there still exists all creatures in their more perfect form. And the goal of man, therefore, is to turn about and realize it. Therefore, it becomes like it. It is at once both identical in some respects with its cause and different from it. Therefore, it both remains and proceeds from it. Therefore, the forward motion of our procession and return is a unitary motion, and to put in the pulsing universe, at every moment, right? Every moment we are realizing an ideal. But within that, we have our own personal ideal, which is to know and realize ourselves. Therefore, all reversion is accomplished through a likeness of the reverting terms to the goal of reversion. Does that make sense? Let me do it again. All procession, proceeding, whether we're talking about Sara and Mani or mind and soul, all reversion, returning, is accomplished through a likeness of the reverting terms to the goal of reversion. And that reversion takes place by a, thank goodness, a communion, right, a communion and a conjunction. Now, in the Platonic tradition, I'd like to add one more thought for you. The way in which mind proceeds and extends itself into soul, Platonic tradition uses a very interesting term. It irradiates. This is a light coming down. It irradiates the soul. That's the way in which it is encountered, radiance. Therefore, mind, all right, being possessed by the soul or the soul possessing the mind, it's a function of mind irradiating from itself a radiance, which is nothing other than intelligence itself from its own source merging in man. Therefore, while we can talk about this experience being Satchitananda, it is also encountered as divine radiance. Right. It can be analyzed in terms of these categories, of course, but as a experience, it's an experience of luminosity. All desire the good, therefore each has a desire of its own and for its own cause. Through that which gives it being, it attains its well-being, which is the source of its well-being and the primary object of its desire. Therefore, that completes the whole idea of the ideal or the completed relationship with procession and reversion. Thank you. Curious Dane?
When you return to your source,
Mm-hmm.
even on a larger scale
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the reincarnation, do you lose? What happens? You said
To?
it's to you as an individual. Do we just merge?
What
according
happened?
To Proclism,
Yeah, what
do we just
happened?
merge into the universe, and we are no more, or?
So, what happened to your 16-year-old self?
Grew up.
Well, what happened?
Yeah, good question.
12. What do you want, as it were, to surface and to continue? The 12-year-old you? 16? 21? Or as much as you are possible to be? In this game, the thing that's repeated is that what you keep as intrinsic to yourself is what you've come to know. That's what you carry with you. Because this existence is a knowing existence. Mind marks all of our existence. That's what we call ourselves, right? Rational man. Should be, right? Yeah. So what you carry is what you've learned. This, for the Platonists, this is a learning experience. Life is learning. Because would you not agree, whichever way you want to consider it, body, soul, mind, in each case, would you not agree, in order to, remember the three ideas? Plan, command, care. Right? In that sense, we're trying to become, as it were, we're trying to become rulers. Rulers, but not tyrants. We're trying to become just rulers to our body. We want to become just rulers, right, in respect to our mind. Right? We want a certain justice in the way in which we function, justice in the highest sense of fairness. Don't we? So that our task here for the Platonic vision is that to achieve any of our goals, we have to in some way bring along the body carefully, not at war with it. Or we have to train the soul so that it plans carefully, it then commands correctly, because it has a vision of caring for itself on the highest level, and therefore is willing to participate more fully in mind on the highest level. So as a consequence of that, mind itself then can be said to help direct us, for mind is sovereign. And we don't mind being subjects when we can discover we're also rulers, or participants in that ruling. So through this levels, different grades of reality, the whole task is learning. Learning to be whatever this is. See, here's the key to it. Each wants to be themselves, but what's that most ideally, the self? What is that? What are your upper limits? In this game, you want to push the upper limits always. You want to push the upper limits. And do you know, I had a very lovely quote, and by heavens, I wasn't able to find that thing. That happened to me once before here. Gosh. So you know what? I think I know which one it is anyhow. I think I know which one it is.
So it's like a spiral in a sense.
The spiral, yeah. And the higher is always...
Return and come back, return and come back and return.
Yeah,
We're always going higher all the time.
Yeah. You can also see it in this way. There's a step we can add to this then. Just making this more... It doesn't make any difference which one, because what I'll say is always true, which is about any of them. Let's call this E, F, G, H, rather than give it formal names, all right? G participates in F. It must be willing to participate in F, as F must be willing for G to participate in it. But there's a part of F which G does not participate in. Therefore, we can call this part unparticipated for G. This is the higher, and G also has a lower. That is, something participates in it. So there's always a higher and a lower, except for the top and the bottom terms. And there's also always a level that is unparticipated, which for the lower is beyond its scope and reach. And therefore, as in any mean analogy between these, this is trying to be most like G, but carries along some of its self with it. Therefore, H has a likeness to G, and G is most itself, right, when it's unparticipated. Which is the shaded area.
But why instead of that, why can't E, F, G, and H be in a circle rather than as a hierarchy?
Well, because in this system it's hierarchical. Yeah. The reason it's hierarchical is that the higher always gives the lower something that the lower doesn't give the higher, but allows it to manifest itself on a higher level. Therefore, it's hierarchical.
Okay.
Like, mind gives soul the power to know. The soul doesn't give it to the mind. So in the same way, with intelligence, being, and vitality as a unity, they are three things kept together in a oneness. Therefore, that presupposes that there must be a oneness beyond being, intelligence, and vitality. For oneness to exist, there must be a one, which presupposes the fact that it exists. Otherwise, oneness could not be. Right? So it's hierarchical. Yeah.
Well, I contend it could be, you make a complete circle.
Well, it is a complete circle. Returns to its source. But you'd like to see. Yeah. Okay. All right. See. That's where you like it. Yeah.
I think that's the way it is.
Yeah, sure. But then, does anything receive anything higher than itself in this?
Well, it's all.
This must be all equal then.
Eventually, yeah.
Then there's no hierarchy. Then there's nothing higher. Therefore, there's nothing that it is going to become like by going beyond its own boundaries. Yeah, that's right. Right.
See, as we tend to become more purified, then the body becomes more purified too.
Well,
So the body can respond directly to the higher.
Does the body respond to it?
It can, it has that potential. Yes.
If the body responds to it, it must have the capacity to respond.
Right.
But that's some intelligence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, then it's not the body, but the intelligence in the body.
Well, intelligence is the body. Whatever it is.
Yeah. Well.
But then it all worked together into a spiral. Why not?
Yes. Well, spiral will get you away from this. All right.
Okay.
If spiral, then.
Right.
When you say that G is most in itself when it's unparticipated, I thought the idea of each wants each to be themselves as much as possible by the idea of participating. So now we have something where you're saying that it's most itself when it's unparticipated.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that? Like, what does that mean?
No, come on.
I mean, how does that relate to what was said before?
In this system, the way we had it a moment ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to return it. There is an unparticipated, there's a participated, and there is the possessor, or the participator. Matter of fact, Let me read you something, which is the very thing I wanted to read. All that participates is inferior to the participated. All that participates is inferior to what it participates. Right? Mind, soul, right? Agree? Watch the next step. And the participated is inferior to the unparticipated. Let me see if I can help with that. All right? Each of these possess a soul, and to the degree, right, participates in its own mind. Each and every soul then knows, as a consequence of functioning with its own mind. Right? But now, this then is this is the participated, isn't it? This is the participated. This is the realm that's participated. Do you agree with that? But there is more to mind than the mind that you participate in, that functions with you. That is mind itself. Not your own mind, but mind. And that's called the unparticipated. And that principle is true all the way up, regardless of what rank you're in.
And that's superior to the participated part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think every soul can know only if it possesses its own mind. Agree? We said that? The mind, which is possessed by a certain soul, is the cause of its ability to know. The mind has the power to give itself to this soul, or the power to be possessed by this soul. Therefore, the mind actually gives itself to the soul, which in turn has its own power. That is the power that the possession of a mind has to make the soul known. Or to make it far more interesting, whatever is possessed in common cannot be caused by the thing that possesses it. In general, right? In general. And therefore it stands apart from it and is the cause of its participation. Therefore mind exists independent of your own mind's participation in your soul. That higher, therefore, aspect of mind, he calls it implants. Mind implants itself. That's the language he uses. Mind implants itself in each soul. Kind of a seeding. That's the stage of development in which man is in. That's why we have so much trouble dealing with our mind. We're relatively new at the game. probably no more than 800,000 years or whenever we got language. Now we have to come to grips with it, have to understand it, have to be able to study it, participate in it on its highest level, and that's the game of philosophy. Curious game. Nice thing about it is you can study it through your everyday experience.
The only way.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for letting me share this with you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed
Thank
it.
you very much, Dr. Grimes.
Good.